Shalom Aleichem. Welcome to tonight's shiur. We now is Parshas Shmini, and because of the summer schedule, we're doing this on Thursday evening. And so we'll go straight into our list of questions. First one is over Yom Tov. I was intrigued. Well, actually, it's bothered me for many years, but then I looked into it. We have two chapters of Tehillim next to one another, which we say every Shabbos morning. That's also the Yom Chov Ches of Tehillim. One is chapter Kuf Lamed Hey, which starts off with Halocho, and the second one is Kuf Lamed Vov, Hoidul Hashem Ki Tov Ki Lo Chasto. So in Hoidul Hashem Ki Tov Ki Lo Chasto, it's Nosen Atzon LeNachla Ki Lo Chasto, נחלה לישראל עבדו Ki Lo Chasto. In chapter in Tehillim Kuf Lamed Hey, B'nosam Atzim נחלה לישראל Amoy. So I remember as a child hearing someone saying there must be a beer in Chassidus on this. At any rate, I've looked around. I haven't found anyone commenting on this, but I want to suggest the following. There is a difference between, now perhaps we once discussed about Hallel vis-a-vis chapter Kuf Lamed Hey. Hallel starts off with Hallelu Avdei Hashem, Hallelu Es Shem Hashem. Kuf Lamed Hey starts off Hallelu Es Shem Hashem, Hallelu Avdei Hashem. The reason given for this is that Hallel, which we say on Yom Tovim, is also known as Hallel HaMitzri. It's celebrating Yetzias Mitzrayim. Till now we were Avdei Paroi, and now we are Avdei Hashem. Therefore, Hallel HaMitzri starts off Hallelu Avdei Hashem, Hallelu Es Shem Hashem. Chapter Kuf Lamed Hey comes in later, it's composed later, therefore it's Hallelu Es Shem Hashem, Hallelu Avdei Hashem. This is already written and published. This also explains why Beis HaLevi is not mentioned as a separate category in Hallel. Beis Yisrael Batach B'Hashem, Beis Aaron Bitchu B'Hashem, Yirei Hashem Bitchu B'Hashem. Hashem's Chron Yevorech is Beis Yisrael, Yevorech is Beis Aaron, Yevorech Yirei Hashem. Yemano Yisrael Ki Lo Nechasta, Yemano Beis Aaron Ki Lo Nechasta, Yemano Yirei Hashem Ki Lo Nechasta. Category of Beis HaLevi is not mentioned there. It does get mentioned in Halocho in the end of Kuf Lamed Hey. Beis Yisrael Bochur Hashem, Beis Aaron Bochur Hashem, Beis HaLevi Bochur Hashem, Yirei Hashem Bochur Hashem. So why is Beis HaLevi mentioned in Kuf Lamed Hey, not in Hallel? That's because Hallel was composed just by Yetzias Mitzrayim. It was before Shevet Levi were given the privilege of being serving in the Beis HaMikdash, in the Mishkan, and therefore Beis HaLevi wasn't a separate category. Later on, they become a separate category. Now, coming back to our question over here, so there's another glaring difference between Kuf Lamed Hey and Kuf Lamed Vov. In Kuf Lamed Vov, L'sichem melech haMeiri, ki lo chaser, Lo'eg melech haBoshen, ki lo chaster. In Kuf Lamed Hey, L'sichem melech haMeiri, Lo'eg melech haBoshen, U'lechel mamleches Knaan. It's a different stage. So Kuf Lamed Vov is composed just when they finished the conquest of the onto the side of the Yarden, as they're going in with Yeshua into Eretz Yisrael. That's when Kuf Lamed Vov is composed. Kuf Lamed Hey is composed after they have already vanquished Chol Mamleches Knaan. It's at a later stage. This also explains, you can see the difference between Nosen Atzim נחלה or leNachla. If you can see in chapter Kuf Lamed Hey, Nosen Atzim נחלה. In Kuf Lamed Vov, leNachla. So here you can see here, this is from Rabbi Heber's Likut, Yashmiya Kolti Losoi, quoting the Rekeach, that we're talking about the lands of Tzichon and Oig. Well, they were given to the Bnei Yisrael, to Bnei Gad and Bnei Reuven, on condition, if they will join in the conquest, the Shiva Shecholku in Eretz Yisrael, then they will be able to have the other side, the Eretz Sichin ve'oig. If not. Therefore, at that stage, when the Mamlechus Canaan haven't been conquered, it's V'onos and add some נחלה. It's not theirs yet. It's נחלה. Once they've already conquered Chol Mamlechus Canaan, V'onos and add some נחלה. Then the Eretz Sichem Ve'oig is a nachlas oilam for Bnei Gad and Bnei Reuven. There is another remez. This is al derech hapshat, and there is al derech haremes, that v'nosan ad some נחלה. There's a mem and lamed. You've got the word mol. As you know, at the beginning of when the Eden came in with Yehoshua, so Yeshua was told to Halocho harvest tzurim, to circumcise the Eden. And therefore, you got by add some נחלה, you got a remes to the word mol, then you have mi'ila. But that's all derech haremes. So, but let's come back to my original question: נחלה לישראל amoy or נחלה לישראל עבדו? So possibly, as I say, I didn't see this in Sforim. I did look, and the following suggestion: that one at the earlier stage, they've left Mitzrayim, they haven't populated Eretz Yisrael yet, so they are נחלה לישראל עבדו. They are, as we said before, celebrating the Avdei Hashem and not Avdei Paroi. Good. So Yisrael Avdei. They are not yet a nation which has a territory, etc. Later, once they are in Eretz Yisrael, it's נחלה לישראל עמי. Once they are settled in Eretz Yisrael, that's when they are identified as נחלה לישראל עמי. Now, you can start picking holes in my theory, because actually in Kuf Lamed Vav earlier it says Amoy also, but possibly here in this context of נחלה, a land, then at that stage they were not yet Begeder Amoy, they were Avdoi. It was the land, the idea of popular people with the land was something which hadn't happened yet. Were they Amoy in other respects? Yes, that's not a problem. Okay, so far this is the first question and answer. Okay, let's go on to the next question, and that is in a town somewhere in Europe, shliach, very dedicated shliach, like in the former Soviet Union, and they have for years they've had only one Kohen. The sad thing is that Kohen was married to a non-Jewish woman. Now, if a Kohen violates the mitzvahs of kahuna, he forfeits the privileges. So if a Kohen works for a burial, works for burying Mesim, if a Kohen, and that could be that's something to ask the question about it. If a doctor, part of his job is also to treat Mesim, so then it will be a shiur whether he's a Kohen can be whether he's a kosher Kohen. For the Kohen, as his seder, his life, how do you say, is arranged in a way that he violates the isurim of kahuna, so he forfeits the privileges of kahuna. And therefore, a Kohen is married to a grusha, so then he's not able to duchen, you don't give him the first aliyah, etc. What about if a Kohen is married to a non-Jewish woman? So it's a violation for every Yid. It's not, if a Kohen eats chazer, so he doesn't forfeit the privileges of kahuna, because he's not violating kahuna, he's violating Torah per se. But nevertheless, in this case, the poskim say that he does. He's living with the goyer, so she's begeder zoino, and even if she would be megayer, she would still be also to a kohen. And therefore, a kohen living with a zoin is also disqualified from duchenen and from privileges of the Torah first. So then, okay, so a kohen what happened now was that for this couple have been living for many years, and now the old shiksa has passed away, and so now you've got this kohen is no longer married to a apostle marriage. Does that make him automatically now kosher to be oila leduchen, etc.? So this is what you have on the screen. This is from the Alter Rebbe's Shulchan Aruch, Siman Nun Gimel, and it's not such an easy answer. He says like this. It's not a chiddush al today, but it's just Vafilu gersho or meso. Even if the Kohen who had been living with a grusha had divorced her, or that she died, posul ad sheyider hanor al das rabim. He has to make a vow that he's not going to, and a vow with al das rabim. Mehanoshim shu also behem. He's making a vow that he's not going to engage in the future with women whom are forbidden to a Kohen. So the fact that the shiksa has died doesn't automatically get him off the hook, because he'll have to also make, now it could be at 85 years old, he may be ready to make such a neder. So that might be okay. But he would need to make that declaration, a neder, not to marry a woman who's forbidden to a Kohen. Let's move on. In that part of the world, if he does want to get married again, it's going to be very hard to find a woman, because most people there are married out. And therefore, even if he'll find a Jewish woman, the likelihood that she hadn't had relations with a Goyish man in the past is at 85. It's going to be a little bit remote. Okay. So unfortunately, I wasn't able to give a heter on that one. Let's move on. So here we have on Chol HaMoed Pesach. So Sukkot is simple. Every day it's the parashas of the Korbanos, 3 times, 4 times, whatever. But comes Pesach, we have 8 readings, a different reading for each day of Pesach. And there's a siman, which is printed also in the Siddur. There's a siman of the sequence. And that sequence basically follows the Seder as they appear in Torah. So the Parsha, which is in Parshas B'Shalach, or Parsha in Boy, is going to be read before the Parsha in B'Shalach, the one in Kisiso, and so on. It's going to be Al Seder haTorah. So if you're rolling the Sefer Torah, you're rolling it forwards, not backwards, from one day to the other. However, some of those interim parashas, which are for Chol HaMoed, do not have enough space for 7 aliyahs. And therefore, when there's a Shabbos Chol HaMoed, so then we switch the Seder, and if I'm not mistaken, we read Kadeish called bochur. It happened in a particular, and so what happened here was, in a particular shul, and this I had from 2 places that they made the same mistake, and they on Sunday of Chol HaMoed, they read the reading of the second day of Chol HaMoed, the way it's written in the Siddur, not realizing that because yesterday was Shabbos, and therefore there had been a switch over of the Seder, therefore today's reading should have been a different one. So they mixed up their readings. They read the wrong one. So on day 4 of Pesach, day 2 of Chol HaMoed, they read that which they should have read on day 3, on the following day. So now comes the next day, and they ask, should we read the correct reading for today, or should we read the one which we should have done yesterday, and we'll read it today to correct our mistake? So this is the question: do you read, if you missed you read on day 4, you read the reading of day 5? What do you do on the day 5? Do you read the reading of day 5, or do you do the reading of day 4 to make up what you missed? So here you have this on the screen. At the time I found it in the Mishnah Berurah, but really this goes back to the Pri Chodosh. And Pri Chodosh, who, I'm not sure how many years before the Alter Rebbe, perhaps 100 years before the Alter Rebbe quotes it very often, the Kos of Harikash, Ibn Yaakov Castro, in his Sefer Eirech Lechem, in Tov v'Shino, v'hikdim hamuchares, v'seder dal yom shel Chol HaMoed. Within the 4 days of Chol HaMoed, you've got a sequence, and if you switch the order in error, So on the following day, you read the reading which you missed. And even though now you're not reading in the sequence as they appear in the Torah, it doesn't matter, as we see by Shema and V'hoyim Shemoya. If you read in Shalokas Sidron, if you said Parshas V'hoyim Shemoya, then Parshas Shema, even though there's a Seder, but because they are separate Parshas, so then if you said Shema and V'hoyim Shemoya first and then Shema, you Yoitze. So therefore also he says you can read, if on Monday they could read that which they should have read on Sunday, even though it's Shaloya Laseh. Fine. This is the Pri Chodesh. As I said, Mishnah asks this way. The Alter Rebbe seems to be following the Pri Chodesh also. It's not 100% clear, but let's read. This is from the Alter Rebbe. This is in Siman Tov Tzadik. So although we don't have Dinei Krias haTorah in Alter Rebbe's Shulchan Aruch, but this is the Yom Kriya of Yom Tovim, so it's there. V'im tov echlif Parshas Yom Echod mehem beParshas Yom Chaveirei. If you switched over, you read the other day's reading, even though it's not Keseder Shein Ksuvas B'Torah, you are Yoitze. And he quotes the sword what from Parshas of Shema. It's not mamish befurish in the Alter Rebbe. What you could read when you read this piece in the Alter Rebbe, you can say like this. It's 10 minutes after Krias haTorah. Oops, we read the wrong one. Should we go back and do Krias haTorah again? That's one question. The next question is, what do you do tomorrow? Do you do tomorrow what you should have done today? These are not mamish the same thing, but I think it's also fairly, although it doesn't say, in other words, the Pri Chodesh says clearly, Koire b'yom shel acharov parsha shadileg. But I think it's adequately clear also in the Alter Rebbe. Even he's saying that even though you're reading not in the Seder as they appear in Torah, that means you're making both readings, but in the wrong order, that's okay. So yeah, now that's a clear psak that the community, the Shul, which read the wrong reading on Sunday, so on Monday they should read that which they should have read on Sunday. That's straightforward. What happened then is, to make things more exciting, so comes along in one particular community where they made this mistake. On Monday they had another 6 Orachim, who yesterday they were in Crown Heights, let's say, and they came on Monday. They came to this small community, and this small community says, "Well, we're going to do the other Kriya today because yesterday we got the wrong thing." And the other people say, "Well, yesterday we got the right thing." So now you got within the we've got within the community. Within the community, we've got 2 groups. These want to do yesterday's Kriya, and these want to do today's Kriya. So just to make, so who wins? So first of all, I think the local community should prevail. But then it's very simple. Let's let one group lein yesterday's Kriya, the local, and then tell the other people we'll indulge. And after, don't be yotze with this Kriya haTorah. After they're done, after the first group is done, we'll do another Krias haTorah for the other group, and everyone will be covered with that. Okay, let's move on. Okay, as I've told you, I was traveling over Pesach. I was away from London, and I noticed in a couple of Botei Chabad, they're davening in different places, and I noticed that they're taking back the Sefer Torah after Krias haTorah in middle of a leTziyon. So just to clarify there's on Shabbos, we do after Krias haTorah and haTorah, Purkon, then Arachim, if it's etc., and then Ashrei, and then the Chazan usually picks up the Sefer Torah, says the last 2 psukim of Ashrei, and he takes in the Sefer Torah. That's on Shabbos. On weekday, so we have the Sefer Torah is held up by us, not by Ashkenazim. we hold the Sefer Torah until after the Kadeish after leTziyon. Then the Chazan says Kadeish, and then the Chazan, whoever is holding the Sefer Torah, says Halocho, take it in. On Rosh and on Rosh Chodesh, we've got that break that we don't finish off leTziyon aloud, and ASAP after Hagbah, somehow the Sefer Torah is taken in. Perhaps not everyone said Ashrei leTziyon, or it's taken in there. What about on Chol HaMoed? There's no tales, there's no Rashas and Rain Tams to switch over. When do you take in the Sefer Torah? So Bepashtus, and this is what you have here in the Alter Rebbe's Siddur. In Chol HaMoed, you say you do Krias haTorah, you say Kadeish, then you do a Hagbek Lila, and then you say Ashrei leTziyon, and then you bring in the Sefer Torah. You finish Ashrei leTziyon, the Agdal Torah V'Yadir, you Halocho Shem Hashem, bring in the Sefer Torah, and then the Chazan says Kadeish to start off Musaf. But in this community, they were taking the Sefer Torah in the middle of leTziyon. And the Shliach kindly told the people, don't worry, if you're not finished, take your time, finish off leTziyon, and then we'll start Shemona Esrei, we'll start Kadeish once you're finished. So I asked him, why are you doing this? So he says that's what they did in 770. So last night I shared this, the shiur, which I given for it, and then someone actually looked up. He found a video of Hoshana Rabbe Tovshim Meches, and you see the Rebbe is standing by Krias haTorah, and the Rebbe is the third Aliyah. Then they do Hagbah, Lila, and then within a couple of seconds they pick up the Sefer Torah, and whilst Ashrei leTziyon ought to be said, the Sefer Torah is being carried and the Rebbe is following. The Rebbe goes to his place, and shortly afterwards, a Chazan starts saying Kadeish. So it's something not that the Gabbai did here. The Rebbe is standing there, and so I was intrigued, and I just suggest that. Otherwise, if you think about it in this leTziyon, the Rebbe has Aliyah, and the Rebbe wants to follow the Sefer Torah. The Rebbe would have to stand by the bima and say that a whole Ashrei leTziyon from the is nitzoze batamt. So therefore, there it looks like they said the Shul is large enough. By the time the Sefer Torah, the Rebbe following the Sefer Torah, by the time the Sefer Torah is on Kadeish, by then it's enough time to finish Ashrei leTziyon, and therefore the Sefer Torah is put in, already finished leTziyon, say Kadeish. I don't know whether you have to apply this in a small shul, where you have 10, 15 people, or even 20, 30 people, to say that you have to follow the same Seder. I think in a smaller crowd, and there's no need to worry about a Rebbe waiting at the bima, then to follow that Seder of you finish leTziyon, then taking the Sefer Torah. So what I'm saying is, sometimes the things which happened in 770 may have been because of the conditions over there. I have in the Siddur a whole thing about in the last couple of years, the Rebbe, by Shabbos Mincha, the Rebbe waited for the Sefer Torah to be put back in the Oron, and only then said Kadeish. Although the official Chabad minhag is by Shabbos Mincha to take the Sefer Torah back in middle of Kadeish, and my svara is very simple. That at that time the layout was different. The Rebbe would daven Mincha near the place of the Farbrengen, and practically it didn't make sense to carry the Sefer Torah during Kadeish. Therefore, he waited till they put the Sefer Torah in. Well, that's just the practicalities. Okay, let's move on to the next point. This is going to be a bit of a surprise, perhaps, but here's the following. A Gabbai has responsibility for a Shul, and in anticipation of Pesach, so he got a bochur, paid him a few pounds per hour to tidy up the Shul. Looks like the Shul had been in sore neglect for years, and the bochur did a thorough job, in the process of which he finds a gold pen. So this is about 4 weeks ago, and the bochur called me up, and he says, "Can I keep the pen?" So I tell him yes. 3 days ago, the Gabbai calls me. He says, I'm intrigued. You Paskin that the boy can keep the pen. Why doesn't it belong to the Shul? The Gabbai doesn't need the pen. It's just so I'll look into it. But here you have a Magen Avraham in Hilchos Beis HaKnesses. Clear halacha. Motzod, if you found an item in the Chatzar Beis HaKnesses, in the premises of the Shul, Gabbai, the one who found it may keep it. We do not say that the premises of the Shul acquires the lost article, the hefker article for the Shul. The fact that your premises is koine something for you, that is considered an extension of yourself. That's called like your hand. Your premises is like your hand. That extension, ve'ein yad lehekdesh, that doesn't apply to hekdesh. Hekdesh doesn't have that extension. Therefore, something which was placed in the chotz of hekdesh, a hefker article, that does not change the ownership. It doesn't become property of the shul. There are other reasons also given for this, but lepoil, the shul is not koine that pen. So when the gentleman who lost the pen, after probably a few days, he realized he doesn't have his pen anymore, it became hefker. It did not become property of the shul. Subsequently, when this boy found it, so he's koine. I gave this over in school today and had a few minutes at the end of the lesson, so I shared this with them. I told them I had a different type of story many years ago, that an electrician was doing a rewire in a house here in London, and as he's making space for the wires, he finds stashed away a bag of gold sovereigns, which was a huge fortune, but probably a few £100, probably. And he asked, he was doing the rewire for a Jewish owner. Is he obliged to give the bag of sovereigns to the owner, or is he allowed to keep them? So I looked into it at the time, and I told him he's allowed to keep them. And he doesn't have to say a word to the owner. And the reason being that there's a concept indeed of kinyan chotzer. So when you acquire a property, so you're acquiring also the articles therein, but that doesn't apply to, that only applies to articles which is likely that you would have come across them. But treasure trove, which is in your house, and it's in a condition, in a place where it's not likely you would have found it, then we would not apply the principle of chotzer koine. So although the Jewish owner of this house had bought the property, that doesn't make him koine this stash of coins hidden away under the in somewhere in the woodwork of the under the stairs, and therefore the electrician is allowed to keep it. Let's move on. So now what we're looking at, making an Eruv Tafshilin. So we had now Erev Pesach, we had Thursday, Friday, and then Shabbos. So because you have a Friday is Erev Yom Tov, so on Wednesday we make an Erev Tafshilin. The shaila is, what about Tuesday night? Can you make an Erev Tafshilin the night before Erev Yom Tov? So some people are very anxious, they might forget, so they want to do the Erev Tafshilin, don't wait for the morning, want to do the night before. So someone share with me, you have here a Sikha, this is from Erev Rosh Hashanah Tafshin Mem Zayin. And the Rebbe mentions about the Erev Tafshilin, and he says, we don't know about the Erev Tafshilin, it has to be close to the Erev Rosh Hashanah, to the beginning of Rosh Hashanah. It's plausible logical to say that Erev Tavshilin could be made Erev Leil Erev Rosh Hashanah. If you did it then, you also achieved. It's an Erev. So the Rebbe uses the word mistaver, which means with a certain degree of apprehension. He says it's logical. And as you see further, the Rebbe is not saying this as a psak. He's saying, and he says further, because the Rebbe discussed the Erev Tavshilin more in a spiritual way, that for sure, the spiritual side of Erev Tavshilin, for sure you can start the night of Rosh Hashanah, and before the night of Erev Rosh Hashanah. And Dayan Raskin Erev Tavshilin, Al Kaponim in Yonei Aruchin, Kadeish, Behek de Machi Ashrei. So the spiritual side of Erev Tavshilin you should do early, but the actual Erev Tavshilin, the Rebbe is saying probably, but lav dafka, yeah, not absolute. So I had written in the margin of my Shulchan Aruch a reference. I'd seen this reference. There's this sefer from Rav Nosson Gestetner, where he says that the Erev Tavshilin is meant to be done at the time when you're preparing for Yom Tov. There's two reasons given for Erev Tavshilin. One reason is covered Yom Tov, that if you're going to cook on Friday, which is Yom Tov, for Shabbos, so you are compromising. Every Yom Tov you say you mustn't do stuff on Yom Tov for after Yom Tov. And here you are doing stuff on Yom Tov for after Yom Tov. So you've compromised covered Yom Tov. So you say, no. You can only do stuff on Yom Tov if you started in advance. You started before. You're just finishing. So that's kind of preserves somehow the covered Yom Tov. The covered Shabbos is that it comes Yom Tov and you have lots of nice food and you got the family and you're celebrating and enjoying, and by the time it comes Shabbos, well, there's just a few crumbs left. There's a bit of some sardines or something, not much left, because you were so excited with the Yom Tov, you forgot to prepare for Shabbos afterwards. So do something to that Shabbos shouldn't be overshadowed. At the time when you're preparing for Yom Tov, all excited to prepare for Yom Tov, do something significant to protect that the Shabbos shouldn't be forgotten. So when is the time to do this? When you're cooking for Yom Tov, that's the time to also make a conscious, symbolic act to prepare for Shabbos. So when are you preparing for Yom Tov? Primarily on Erev Yom Tov, the night before Efshanish. All right, Balabatim and Balabostas will argue with me. They'll say, for sure, Yom Tov you do spend a couple of days preparing. It's not just Erev Yom Tov. It's probably true. And perhaps there's rayas also from the Rambam, which we're learning now in Hilchos Ishes, where it talks about how many days they made a takona, when to make a chasna, to give enough time. They didn't like chasnas on Sunday. They wanted you to have a few days to prepare for a chasna. So it looks like they also used to spend days cooking for a chasna. But meanwhile, he says the following, that the mitzvah of hachona is only on the very day. It says Vayashkim Bavram Babeker, and we say that Yashkim Babeker on Fridays you get up early to prepare for Shabbos. So Halocho, the time for preparing for Shabbos is on Friday, from Friday morning, but not from Thursday night. And on that basis, he wants to say the same thing with Erev Yom Tov. The main time for Hachona for Shabbos, for Yom Tov, is on Erev Yom Tov Mamish. And therefore, the night before, he says, according to the Rosh, you wouldn't be able to make an Erev Tavshilin the night of Erev Yom Tov. So the Rebbe said Mistaver. He's not so keen about this. And now I shared this last night, and then someone pointed out to me that actually after this Farbrengen, the Rebbe's Mazkir, I'm presuming it's labeled wrong. In this source, in Ha'orsa B'Urim, this was put in by Rabbi Levi Garelik, and you can see the Rebbe's handwriting. Well, you can see, I think it's labeled handwriting, and then the Rebbe's comments on this. And I've shared this in the not so recent, I picked up a sefer of Rabbi Groner's Ha'oris on the Rebbe's Farbrengens and the Rebbe's response. I didn't see this item there. But meanwhile is the following. After this Farbrengen, Rabbi Grona writes to the Rebbe, that which you had said in the Farbrengen about doing an Erev Tafshilin the night before, the Rabbonim, various Rabbonim are asking, is this indeed Halocho L'maisa? Because the impression from the Alter Rebbe's Shulchan Aruch is it has to be Erev Yom Tov Mamash. On this, the Rebbe responds by erasing the words Zehu, to say that it's Halocho L'maisa. And he says, Einoi, he adds, Einoi Halocho L'maisa L'hokel. I'm not saying Halocho L'maisa that you can do the aid of the night before. Af Shelafia Nias Daiti. Bim Yoitzi L'derech U'Chayotze B'Kol Hayom Kosher. If, let's say, on Erev Yom Tov Mamish, you're going to be traveling, and that's why you want to do it the night before. No. Yoitze L'derech U'Chayotze Kol Hayom Kosher. It's valid the whole day, v'gam lifnei zeh, and even if you did it in advance. V'zil bosataymer be'im yisehu erev yom tov. If you make the aid of erev yom tov. So what I'm reading in the Rebbe's answer, it's not a very clear answer. Possibly the Rebbe is saying the following: if on erev yom tov you're going to be very busy driving or whatever, getting ready for yom tov, then the erev yom tov is stretched even earlier. So if you're just relaxed on the night before, why you call it Erev Yom Tov? But if you're busy all this time, so that's what I think what the Rebbe is saying here. You say Erev Yom Tov. If what you're doing is now you're consciously leading up, preparing for Yom Tov, then it's valid. But Stamazer, if you're relaxed, so then the Rebbe doesn't say it's okay to do it Erev Yom Tov, the night before Yom Tov. On the bottom, we have here from Piskei Teshuvos, further discussion. This one says it's for sure it's okay to do it the night before and to make a bracha, because it's usual for people already to start cooking the night before, and therefore it's also a heker for Shabbos. And he brings for another one from Yashiv says, it's okay, others are not so keen. So in contemporary poskim, can you do an Erev Tafshilin the night before? Some say yes, some say not. As I say, the Rebbe is not giving you a total green light unless there's a certain pressure, which therefore makes the whole Erev Yom Tov a little bit, starting a little bit earlier, and therefore it would be okay. I read also that Rabbi Chadakov once asked the Rebbe about this. On Erev Rosh Hashanah, he would go with the Rebbe to the Ohel, and would get back from the Ohel very close to Yom Tov. And therefore he asked the question, could I do an Erev Tafshilin before we go out? Because he's worried by the time he comes back, it may be forgotten. And at the time, the Rebbe told him actually to wait till he comes back. But here in this Sikha, the Rebbe, which was many years later, the Rebbe is saying, I don't see a problem of doing it earlier on in the day. Okay, that was question number 6. Question number 7. Question number 7, we have a guest for the Seder who is not Shem Shabbos, but is not Mechal Shabbos B'Farhesya. I've gone through this before. Mechal Shabbos B'Farhesya means that a person has no compunction of violating Shabbos in the presence of people who are conscientious of Shabbos. So there are people who don't keep Shabbos in private, but in public they are respectful. They are not on the level of Mechal Shabbos, who is considered like a goy. So now here's a question. I got this call a couple of days before Pesach, having a guest. They don't think it's Shem Shabbos, but are they allowed to give him non-mevushal wine? So if the person had been mamish and Mechal Shabbos, then I would say don't give them non-mevushal wine. Here you have the following. This is from Sefer Torah. There are those who say that you shouldn't give non-mevushal wine to a mumer, because once it's in his hand, it becomes like forbidden wine. So you're giving him wine which is forbidden. He's going to be mechal. He's going to be menasech the wine by touching it, and so he's drinking. So by giving him wine which is not mevushal, it's as if you're giving him a non-kosher food. Not everyone agrees with this, but So there's a couple of points about this. One is there's the famous letter of the Rebbe about someone who told the Rebbe that he had been on the boat, on the ship, traveling from Eretz Yisrael to America, and the captain had joined them for Kadeish, and the Rebbe was very upset with this whole shipping thing happening on Shabbos. And the Rebbe said, "Did you realize what happened? The captain touched the wine. He's a Mechal Shabbos. The wine becomes Osir. That means the broch on the Kiddush was a broch levatala, etc." So we are careful. We are careful not to allow in a Mechal Shabbos for Hesia to touch wine, etc. Okay. Someone mentioned to me this morning a famous story that the Rebbe told the Sadigera Rebbe when he visited him, and the Rebbe told him that he received a question from Russia, the Soviet Union. This is about 40 years ago. That a man writes to the Rebbe that I go to work on Shabbos because I have no choice. But when I'm at my workplace, I don't do any malacha. So I'm befarhesia Mechal Shabbos, but I'm not really Mechal Shabbos. So can I make Kiddush on wine? That was his question. He has the parhesia, but he's not Mechal Shabbos. And so the Sarigera Rebbe asked the Rebbe, so what did the Rebbe answer? So the Rebbe says, that's actually irrelevant to our discussion. All I wanted to tell you is the extreme pressure, suffering, which the Yidden in Russia are enduring. I think the Rebbe then at that time said that in nature you can jump off a roof, you can't jump onto a roof. And here you have for 70 years Yiddishkeit, Hamasiras Nefesh of jumping onto a roof, the impossible conditions which the Yidden were living in Soviet Russia at the time. Okay, so that's as I say, the person here in this case was not a open Mechal Shabbos, and therefore I told him it's okay because if you're not Mechal Shabbos in public, then if he touches wine, the wine is okay. It's only if the person is, as I say, Befarhesi has no compunctions to do so in public mamash. For that matter, if a person has his shop open, has his office open, it's also called Mechal Shabbos Befarhesia. But this person didn't have a shop. It's a person who's the way I understood. Okay, a couple of more points which we have here. How are we doing for time? Okay. So I'm going to share with you something which I spoke about when I was in Chicago about Tefillah B'Tzibur and how much time you have to go out of your way to daven with a minyan. And I felt it's an important point, although you might wonder how many people are asking these questions, but for all the more reason it needs to be put on the table that there is a halacha here in Siman Tzadik, that whilst you're traveling, your own carriage, your own car, and ahead of you, this is a Gemara in Psochim, if you're ahead of you, you know that there's going to be a place where you'll be able to daven ba'asara, so you have to keep on traveling a dalad million, up till another dalad million, to be able to daven ba'asara rather than to stop here and daven here. Then he says, if it's out of the way, la'acharo, you need to go up till a mil. Up till a mil, you have to go out of your way to daven with a minyan. Now this is the Gemara in Psochim. Here the Alter Rebbe puts in brackets, and I've told you in the past, whenever I see a brackets in the Alter Rebbe's Shulchan Aruch, I start getting very interested. Why is it in brackets? And is it what it means? It's a chiddush, and it could be learned differently. So here the Alter Rebbe adds something which is not written in other poskim. V'hu hadin hador b'yishuv toich mil l'moken shemispal shebasora. Well, someone who lives in a built-up area, and so he's not traveling. He's sitting at home, and within a hiluch mil, which is either 18 minutes, according to the Alter Rebbe, it's 24 minutes. Within 24 minutes, there is a place where you daven basara. Chayiv leilech b'chol yoyim bochur v'erev is obliged to go daily, morning and evening, to daven with a basar. Davening basar means to daven Shemona Esrei with the minyan. It doesn't mean to come there and to learn chassidus whilst the tzibur are doing are davening and you're sitting and learning or having a cup of coffee, lahavdil, it means davening with the minyan. And so when it does have a duty, the Alter Rebbe is mechadash here, that you do need to go out of your way up to a shiur mil, hiloch mil, to bochur v'erev. Now, take a look here in the Mishnah Berurah. V'alkein hador b'yishuv toich mil. This is quotes. He quotes from the Alter Rebbe. It says clearly, Shulchan Aruch Agras. Tzorich leilich b'chol yoim ba'bochur lispal ba'asora avaloi ba'erev. So it's very strange. He quotes the Alter Rebbe, but he changes. The Alter Rebbe said bochur v'erev, and the Mishnah Berurah said bochur, but ba'erev you don't have to, because you don't have to go by night in order derech to make up to join a minyan. And then he says Teichachas megula, for those people a rebuke for those who are living in a town and they're too lazy to go to a shul and daven mincha and ma'ariv. Meanwhile, we've seen here a chiddush of the Alter Rebbe. Why is it a chiddush? Because you could have argued that Mele, you're ready, you've got your coat on, you're ready in your carriage. So you say, all right, you have to go out of your way, hiloch mil, up to a mil to daven with the minyan. But you're sitting comfortably at home to have to put on your coat and your boots to go out to the minyan. Efshe nicht. So here the Alter Rebbe is mechadish that you do have to. Uhu adin yador b'yishuv. Now, the Mishnah Berurah had said about not having to go out at night, which may be legitimate before lampposts were invented. But the Reb Chaim Noah says, then the Alter Rebbe says, bochur v'erev, he means to go out for mincha. And so he kind of responds to the Mishnah Berurah's point. He says the Alter Rebbe is saying bochur v'erev means erev to go out for mincha. Bearing in mind, and if even in that simon is evident, the earlier minhag used to be davening mincha and ma'ariv one after the other, and they would daven ma'ariv. It's only later it became a change of practice. The Alter Rebbe applauds this. People daven ma'ariv bismano. It used to be mincha ma'ariv one after the other. So when the Alter Rebbe says bochur v'erev, it means to go out for mincha. I'm going to come back to this a little bit more, but just looking at this Mishnah Berurah, I'm very, very confused. And if you have any good friends who are into Mishnah Berurah, I'm going to ask you to ask them pshat here. Mishnah Berurah said here that you have to go every morning to daven ba'asara, but you don't have to go out in the afternoon, the il ba'erev, because you don't have to go by baderech. Now wait a minute. Are you talking about yishuv or baderech? We talked about hador b'yishuv. Then he says you don't have to go out at night, baderech, for a minyan. So okay, but so you don't have to go out for a minyan by night. So then then 2 lines later he starts giving a whole rebuke for people who don't go to the shul mincha v'ma'ariv. You just said ein tzorich leilech balayla. So make up your mind. Either you do or you don't have to. So I'm really confused. And I looked around. There's couple of editions of Mishnah Berurah. No one seems to respond, address this. It seems to be the different writers. One wrote one sentence, one wrote the other sentence. But as I say, I'm quite confused. But meanwhile, I want to share with you one more point about this. And that is that the Tazria David, who was one of the major commentators on the Alter Rebbe, David Ortenberg was Rov in Barditchev about 150 years ago, perhaps. So he says, here the Alter Rebbe says you have to go out of your way. If you're sitting comfortably at home, you have to go out of your way to daven with minyan. You have to go out ad hiluch mil. Take a look in Simon Kuf Samach Gimel. Talks about for Netilas Yadayim, with the Bryson Gemara Psachim talks about together. You have to go out of your way for Netilas Yadayim. You have to go out of your way to Tefillah Ba'asara. And so there it says, if you're sitting at home and you don't have water for Netilas Yadayim, you have to go out of your way dalad milin. So wait a minute. It's both sitting at home, and it comes to davening. You say davening with haTorah. Yeah, the maximum you're obliged to exert yourself is hiluch mil. When it comes to Netilas Yadayim, is dalad milin. It seems to be inconsistent. So I wanted to suggest that there's a difference, because even if you stay home, you could daven at the same time as the minyan, because it's also mentioned in earlier on in this siman that even if a person who's not able to get to shul, he should be mechaven nispal b'shor shatzibur mispalim. The tzibur are davening 7 o'clock, you should daven 7 o'clock. They're davening 3 o'clock, davening you should daven. You should try to work out your schedule that you're davening at home, synchronize with the time that they're davening with the minyan. So possibly, if you don't get out of your house and you don't get any water, you'll be missing out on Netilas Yadayim totally. If you don't get out of your house to get to a minyan, well, you'll still be able to have tefillah ba'asara in this kind of remote connection way, and therefore the rules are more lenient, that you don't have to exert yourself more than hiluch mil for tefillah ba'asara, whereas for Netilas Yadayim you do. That's one suggestion. I saw in Poskim other suggestions, and one is to say, is tefillah ba'asara a mitzvah? Netilas Yadayim we know is a mitzvah. So takana d'Rabbanan, it's a mitzvah. Is tefillah ba'asara a mitzvah? Listen carefully. To make an eid of tchumin, it's only lidvar mitzvah. And the Shittas Harosh is that you cannot make an eid of tchumin just for tefillah ba'asara. Tefillah ba'asara is a very important thing. It doesn't qualify as mitzvah, and therefore you cannot make an erev tchumin for that purpose. Lepoil we paskin that it is considered a mitzvah enough to make an erev tchumin to be able to go for a minyan, which is people do this, especially on holidays. So possibly tefillah ba'asara is not as strong an chiyuv as Netilas Yadayim, and therefore for the stronger chiyuv of Netilas Yadayim, you have to go a daled million out of your way, and for the lesser chiyuv of tefillah ba'asara, not. Okay, I think that's enough discussion about that. My question was, if you're at home, not going to shul, how much time do you have to wait around to be able to synchronize with the tzibur? One should be waiting, at least according to this. If you're at home, possibly you should be waiting also. You should work out your schedule, that you should even wait a shiur mil, or perhaps even shiur daled mil in order to synchronize tefillah ba'asara. That's according to one svara. Okay, let's come back to two smaller details, and that's questions number 9 and number 10. So, in our Haggadah, shebechol haleilos anu ochlin chometz oimatzah, and in the Mishnayos it says chometz umatzah. So, in most Haggadahs, I said most. I apologize. I did not make a survey of most Haggadahs. It would take a long time. There's thousands of Haggadahs being published, but very popular is more the nusach shebechol haleilos anu chometz umatzah. In our Haggadah, it's chometz oimatzah. Now, I think the oy matzah is more correct. It doesn't mean every night we eat chometz and matzah. We have the freedom to have one or the other. On the margin of the Mishnayos, there is a work called Shinuyah Neschoes. It shows different versions and different manuscripts, etc., different prints. So on the words chometz umatzah, he refers to Beis Dalet Nun stands b'tfus Napoli. In the Naples print, there it says chometz oimatzah. So it's not a chiddush of the Alter Rebbe to say chometz oimatzah. It's also in earlier prints of the Mishnayos. And what I have on the screen here is also from a sefer called Haggadah Shlema from Reb Menachem Kasher, who did also the series of Torah Shlema. And so he has chilufei nuschos. So is it chometz umatzah or chometz oimatzah? And he has codes of a dozen or more manuscripts which have chometz oimatzah rather than chometz umatzah. So if anyone challenges you, why is Chabad and Haggadah different? So the answer is that there are dozens of nuschos out there which have chometz oimatzah, and as I say, it's more meduyak to my humble opinion. Possibly that's why the Alter Rebbe chose it that way. Chometz oimatzo rather than chometz umatzo. Finally, I got the following feedback on the discussion which we had before Pesach. And I told the story of the Tzemach Tzedek, who was concerned about Vanitzakel Shem Elokeinu, and is corroborated with the word Vayis Ochu. And he was so perturbed by this to the degree that he made a Shalos Cholim, and the Zohar says to him, in the dream he's told, look up at the Zohar, and the Zohar says, Tzaka v'zaka chadahu. Now that's what I told over, and what I did explain, that the difference between tzaka and tzako is a cry in desperation, and zako is a cry of alarm, a call to action. So this shoyel now refers to be to a pasuk in Shoftim, Vayitzoaku b'nei Amoin, Vayachanu bagilod, and Rashi says Vayitzoaku nesvu al yidei krois. So this debunks what I had said, that Zako is a call to arms and Tzako is a cry of desperation. Where here it says Vayitzoaku b'nei Amoin. And actually that's in chapter Yud, and chapter Yud base, it says the same thing. Vayitzoek ish Ephraim, Vayavot Sofoino. And that's when they challenge Yiftach, why did you ignore us, etc. Meanwhile, we have Vayitzoek means they called their armies together. All right, so before we debunk it totally, so first of all, where did I get this from? So this is from the Malbim in chapter Kuf Zayin in Tehillim, where you have Vayitzaku El Hashem, and then you have Vayuzaku. And he says, Tzako Gedolim Mizako. That the word Tzako implies a greater cry than Zako. He doesn't go into what I'd said about desperation or alarm. He does not say, right. What I would like to say is the following. I don't like debunking my own stuff unless I have to. Is the following, that in this context of Vayitzoaku, it's a context of hif'il, which means it was caused upon others. That's quite a strong effort. There's PL and etc., which are softer, but causing someone else to do something is a stronger form of a verb, and possibly that's why instead of Vayitzoaku b'nei Amoin, here they use the stronger form Vayitzoaku b'nei Amoin, Vayitzoek ish Ephraim, dafke in the hif'il context, and then the word, the Chodesh of Tzako is used instead of Zako, whereas I'm still open to someone showing me somewhere we should use the Chodesh of Tzako in a PL, in a softer form, and still using tzaka when it's a call to arms rather than a cry of desperation. Just to reiterate what I said then, that when the Zohar says zaka v'tzaka chadhu, my suggestion was that even when a Yid does have a strategy, a call to arms, that's on the outside, but on the pneumius, it's vayitzak, it's a tzak who is crying out to Hashem to help us out. And indeed, that's Idnar Tzako of Ad Mosai. How long are we in Golus? And we should be taken out of Golus with Mashiach Tzidkenu, B'mheir of Yomeinu Mamash. B'shah Guten Chodesh, and Guten Shabbos.
Shabbos, Yasher Koyach.